Some viewers may find the use of cuss words in this video to be offensive. Others won't give a shit. You've been warned. The Underground. This phrase drives us batshit crazy.
Hey everybody, Thursday night, welcome back to the Underground. We got Rick, Scott, Sean, and we're super excited because tonight we're continuing on with the whole point of this show, which is having other people come on and tell their story. And so with us tonight from Austin, Texas, we have David Johnson. Woo!
Thank you for being. Thank you.
Yeah, super excited.
We all go way back with David, back to the mission. And although we didn't all have a lot of contact on a regular basis, we all had run into each other, knew of each other.
So, yep. David, who did you know while you were out there? Which of us did you? I know you met me.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if you and I were. I don't know. Whatever happened, we can get into that, like the actual Geelong situation,
the Geelong
fiasco, whatever. But I don't think we were actually companions.
I think we were.
I don't know if I think they just sent me and a couple other Fatlele and Higgins showed up.
Here's what I know is I wrote of every companion I had on this page in my journal, and your name.
Yeah.
From Soda Springs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's what I remember too.
So did you have a chance to know these guys while you were out?
Just like you have in your journal, I have names of people. And I have Sean's name is written right around the time, like June of 2004 or 94. Were you like in New South Wales or up in the country right around that time?
I was up in Wagga.
You were in Wagga.
I was in Wagga. And if I remember correctly, weren't you around where were you in New South Wales?
I was in Deniliquin, New South Wales. Me and this guy opened it up for I was there for 2 months, and then I was in Wagga right after that.
What do you
mean? Who were you in Wagga with?
When he says we opened it up, if you were a missionary and you got sent out to a different area, a brand new area, and no missionaries hadn't been there for a while or whatever, you opened up that area. So that's what David's talking about right now, just to clarify.
I think we crossed paths a number of times, if I remember.
Yeah.
Correctly.
So, and then Rick, I have you written, I think you were in the other country. So you guys had that story about when you two met, Scott and Rick. I think I was there when that happened. Because me and you, we popped the cable on the car.
Oh, yeah.
And then we went to see Wilden.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Higgins and Falele stayed in Geelong, and Lloyd had come to town with Oliphant right before you guys got to Geelong.
Yeah.
And I was like, how the hell did you drive out here? This is a sister from our mission, and they'd driven out of the area. You only get a certain amount of kilometers every month if you have a car that you can use. And we were way outside of these sisters' area. And she's like, oh, I just popped the odometer on the cable on the odometer, and it doesn't track your Ks. And I was like, you must show me how to do this. You and I put it to the test, and we drove out to Sunbury.
Where
Chad was at.
Yep.
And we both knew Wilden.
Because Wilden and I, we went out. We were in the MTC together.
Oh, that's right. Because I remember you guys. I've got a picture.
Yep.
So right here of you and Wilden with me right before you guys went home.
So I killed off Wilden.
Yeah.
I was in the city and got shipped back out to the bush to Sunbury. to kill Wildenoff. So I was
Yeah.
there with him for his last.
And you are correct. That was when we went out there. We played SEPA that day in Sunbury. We walked into the flat, saw Rick's Nikki Taylor calendar up
Yep.
on the wall, spent a day out there. Yeah, we were really good missionaries. We were really good, but we saw each other.
Yeah.
Like when we first met, I remember
Yeah.
meeting you and just being like, "Oh, he's a good one."
There was always a question of who are they going to put me with now?
Yeah, and how Zam is he going to be?
Exactly. How's Zammy's going to be?
We've talked
Is it
about
going to be?
I think in the first couple episodes about Zam.
Yeah.
And it just stood for how strict, how letter of the law people were, and so that was kind of the question: who am I going to get? How Zam are they?
Yep.
We get along.
So
and one of the interesting things about going Zam is, you know, prior to Hearst, it was interesting because when Stolten was out there, you had all these missionaries that you had your Zam missionaries, but you had a lot of missionaries that were what do you say? At
Cool?
least, yeah,
Chill?
cool. But when Hearst came in, changed the entire dynamic.
Yeah.
The entire dynamic meant you had cool missionaries that went to asshole missionaries. And so back to what you were saying, yeah, it was like playing roulette. I
Yep.
never knew what I was going to get and what missionary I was going to get.
Yeah.
Right? And I was just, yeah, I think we all shared that anticipation, anxiety of transfers.
Yeah.
well, yeah, definitely.
And
That's
I had this I don't know, just to kind of pull all this together. As soon as you guys, this is in April of this year, and as soon as I saw you guys had the podcast, and I realized, because I was friends with Scott on Facebook I've been friends with you for like, I don't know, a long time. You're the one of the only
2012
people
was that concert that we went to in Houston where we messaged you. So
yeah, that was like 2012 or something, 2013 or something. But you're one of the only people from the mission that I've actually kept in touch with. And suddenly I see you guys having this podcast, and I'm like, oh my God, they're talking about the mission. They're talking about the mission. And it was like, I think there was a couple weeks ago, you had one of your little update podcasts, and you were talking about the Reddit. Your experience with somebody on Reddit, and somebody who was after us had messaged you and said, oh my God, like, this is the first time in 15 years that I've actually been excited to think about the mission.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I felt in April. And that's exactly how I felt with watching your episodes, is I've been like, this experience that I had that was so meaningful to me, but not for the meaningful in the way that it was supposed to be, but meaningful in a way that like really shaped who I am. I've actually wanted to go look at it and think about what it's meant. Whereas because before it was like I shoved that in my past and I kind of pretended it wasn't there, because it honestly, it wasn't the quote unquote greatest 2 years of my life, if you understand what I mean. Like from the perspective of like how it's, you come home and it's like supposed to be. I came home and I honestly didn't feel like this was it was I don't know.
It sounds like you weren't able to look at it from a positive light.
Not entirely. Not from an LDS light anyway.
It's pretty crazy because, you know, hearing you say those things, and you've shared a lot of that kind of stuff with us through our communications and email and stuff, but that's something that's kind of blown me away, because I would have never thought of us doing the show as having that kind of effect on somebody from the mission. That was never something that occurred to me. And so to hear you say that, and then like you said, that message that we got from that person that had served just after us, and saying what he did about not being able to think about his mission in a positive light. And now, I mean, that has made it all worth it.
Well, like I love that you are able to look back and see those 2 years, and I want to put into perspective what the expectation of those 2 years is. The expectation when you
Yeah.
go out is that you're going to go out and you're going to convert people to the church, and you're going to have just wild success, and you're going to have these faith promoting experiences, and it's going to just solidify your testimony in the gospel. But that wasn't the experience that I had.
No.
It doesn't sound like that was the experience that you had. And so we put it on a shelf, as the general authorities say. We go, well, that happened. I'm going to put it up there, and I'm not going to think too much on it. But to be able to go back and reflect on it, like we've done since April, since March, since we started doing this, and the healing that's taken place,
Yeah.
being able to just look at it and go, oh my gosh, there was actually a lot of stuff that happened. I need to process that. I really need to think about it. So to be able to look back and say, maybe it wasn't what I thought going out there it was going to be like, but I had these experiences. I met these people. I grew as a person, and there's worth there. There's value there. And so for all those people that are watching that have, maybe put their mission on a shelf because you've come home and you crossed it off the list and you went out, you did it, and you haven't thought too much about it, it's worth going back and looking at journals and reading through letters to see who you were and what you were going through. Because like you said, it helped shape who you are. It definitely helped make me who I am. And I know the same for you guys.
I think, if you've watched our mission story episodes, you know that we went through, for what was for us at the time, very traumatic experience. And maybe that's one of the other benefits of us staying in contact and staying close all these years, is that if nothing else, we were able to look back on our mission as something positive just because we got our friendships out of it.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have to look back on it from just the bad experiences that we had. We knew that we got something very positive out of it as well. And so we've been able to, I'll just speak for myself, but I've been always able to look at my mission from a positive standpoint because of that.
Well, I know if you'd have been around, we'd have been telling those stories about popping the boot, and we'd have been popping the cable. We'd have been telling the stories about that week that we served together in Geelong and what the time was like, and it probably would have changed it. When you came home, did you hang out with anybody from the mission at all?
No, not really.
We've begun at the end.
Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit.
Okay, that's fine.
Let's go back and let's talk about the beginning. Because obviously, David's was a Mormon, was raised in a Mormon church. So growing up in the church, we kind of like to start off with this, give us a gauge as to how Mormon was your family. Are we talking Osmonds up here, or are we talking like the Kevorkians down here?
Okay, so do you guys have so I'm from a small town in Idaho. It's called Soda Springs.
Okay.
It's about an hour and 15 minutes north of Logan. So if you just go drive north and just keep driving. And my parents, and I've heard them use this phrase, that there's Mormons and then there's Utah Mormons.
I've heard other people use
Hey, fucking man.
Okay, but for them, the Utah Mormons, those are the ones that don't keep the Sabbath day holy. They go shopping on Sunday. They aren't serious. So my family, I would put higher than the Osmonds. Maybe not as high as some people, but pretty high. Like,
Hear that, Donnie?
pretty high. Pretty high. So we, I think, I don't know, how do you gauge it?
Did you go to church?
Go to church on Sunday.
So here's a thing that we always cover. Were you allowed to play on Sundays? Were you allowed to go outside?
We were, but I don't know, there wasn't a lot of playing with friends. No playing with friends on Sunday.
So you could play outside, but just family.
Yeah, and it was always it was me and my brother, and then I had the younger sister. So it was always, as far as television is concerned, it kind of like as the day wore on, my parents wore down, and by the end of it, you could watch I don't know.
Just get out of my hair. Go.
Yeah, exactly. And it was always a battle with me to watch. I always wanted to watch football, right? I always wanted to be able to watch sports on Sunday. So that was kind of a battle there, but pretty much, you know, what you would expect, typical, you know, family home evening, family prayer, pretty much every night, family home evening every week.
In the
Yeah.
bio that you said that your family had been in the church for generations and goes back to pioneer times.
Yeah, so there are family members in Nauvoo. All my family, either few of them converted. They were Americans that converted, but many of them converted in Europe.
Well, and so I was just going to say, let's explain this a little bit, because if I understand that probably most of our, if not all of our viewers right now are probably in the church or have been in the church or whatever and would understand this. But for those who might not know, the church started with Joseph Smith in New York.
Palmyra,
They basically got run out of New York and ended up in
Kirtland, Ohio,
and then they got run out of there.
and they went to far west Ohio,
And then run out of there.
They end up in Nauvoo, where they think is their new Zion.
They call it Zion.
basically. And that's, I think Nauvoo was their Salt Lake City before Salt Lake City, because they ended up getting kicked out of there. So
Yeah.
for someone's to have ties back to Nauvoo, that's the very early stages of the church.
because from Nauvoo, the pioneers then
And
migrated
it's Salt City.
to Salt Lake City. So that's where
Yeah.
that was Brigham Young that led them. So you're saying you had family that were on that trail coming from
Oh
Nauvoo.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So at least one of my mom's ancestors was in Nauvoo. She's like in this group called the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers, where she does like history stuff, you know, with the other people. I have polygamist ancestors.
Really?
Yeah. So, and I'm the second, like I'm the second wife from the second wife's line, right? So I would have, you know, if it weren't for polygamy, I wouldn't even be here, right?
Wow.
So,
Yay for polygamy.
so if you could say that, but yeah. So, and as far as my family's concerned, like both my parents, both their families were LDS. You know, and going back to, you know, as long as they've been in Idaho and northern Utah. So some of them come from Logan area.
So understanding that you've got very deep roots in
Yeah.
the church, what was that like? What was your childhood like, being brought up in
Growing up in the church.
So I mean, the Book of Mormon. So you remember the Book of Mormon reader? It was like kind of like a little book. It was kind of like a comic book.
I have one. Yeah.
Yeah, like that, and along as they had the other ones for the other scriptures too, but especially for the Book of Mormon, that was as real of history as any other history.
Do you know what he's talking about?
Isn't that the comic strip?
It's like that book.
Yeah.
It was like a.
It's like a,
It was a
yeah,
bendable. It was a. It
Yeah.
was
It
hardbound.
was kind of like a comic version of the Bible with pictures
Yeah.
and stuff.
But it was the Book of Mormon.
But
Right.
yeah, so as far as like Nephites and Lamanites and stuff like that, that was as real as American history, right? As real as world history. That was just as real as biblical history.
In Soda Springs, was it really? Was it a large Mormon community up there, or was it 50-50?
So it's an interesting community because it's got a historic roots as like from pioneers establishing it, but it's also got like industry since then. So since like the 1950s. So it's got an influx of, it's a really tiny town. There were about 4,000 people when I was growing up, and there's fewer now. So it's a small town. But there was quite a number of non-Mormons. But that's not to say that Mormons weren't probably as pretty dominant as far as like, you know, the culture and stuff. As far as like, you know, being mayors and city councilmen and being part of politics. It's a Mormon community, but there's still non-Mormons there, you know.
So from a Mormon church perspective, I always looked at Idaho as like a Utah B. You
Yeah.
know, so many church members up there. So it's interesting for me to hear that. But what you're saying is, even though it wasn't maybe the concentration of Mormons as other places in Utah or maybe even in Idaho, it still had a pretty good hold on the area.
Oh yeah, for sure. It still had it. Yeah, absolutely. And so growing up, I mean, I don't know, growing up, it was, church, and obviously, you guys have said this before, but Scouts was huge.
Yeah.
Scouts was like a big, huge deal. My dad was the Scout. He was the Scout master for a long time, until a couple of years after I left the church, they actually made him the bishop. So, I mean, if that gives you some sense of my family. I did Scouts and did church basically until early high school, and then I didn't have, right around high school in my ward, suddenly I didn't have a lot of kids my age that were in my ward that were like.
That really surprised me to hear that, because like what Rick was saying, I always thought of Idaho as just a branch of Utah. So to hear that was,
It was kind of a gap, but like I said, there was non-Mormon kids, and so I kind of found myself like right at junior high school age, is like there were some younger, my brother's age, and some older, but right around my age there weren't. There was a couple kids that I think one of them or two of them moved away out of my direct wards. There's still kids in the town that were LDS or an active LDS. But as far as me and having friends in the ward, there was nobody there. So I was like always the deacon's quorum president, always the teacher's quorum president, always I was always that, right? And so right around junior high and high school, my friends that I became close to weren't actually LDS. So I kind of had like this, I don't know, I had friends that weren't Mormon.
Yeah.
And one friend, three friends, my three guys that I considered my best friends in high school. One of them, he technically was Mormon, but he wasn't from an active family. And so that was always kind of like, I got to be a missionary and help him come back to church, right? Another one of them, his family had left the church years and years ago, and he had absolutely no interest in the church. And another kid, his family was RLDS.
Yeah.
tell them what RLDS is.
It was the reorganized church. They were the people who didn't come west when the church split up when Joseph Smith died, or when there was a kind of a who to follow crisis right after Joseph Smith was killed in Illinois, and a lot of people went west with Brigham Young. Other people stayed in the Midwest.
They felt that the Smith line needed to be the prophet. So
Yeah.
Was that actual apostolic, lineage that you should follow? And so the RLDS came from.
stands for the reorganized.
Right.
And so later on, I ended up, this guy, he's still my best friend. And it's interesting because we're now like, he's still what I call my best friend. And later on, like we laugh about it because he's not in that either. And I'm not in LDS either. And we kind of, we're in different places. We're in more of the same place spirituality than we ever were as kids. Anyway.
That's cool to hear.
We lived together a couple different times, once right after high school, and then after my mission, we also lived together again. But he had a reorganized LDS, he had a RLDS Doctrine and Covenants. And I went through that before my mission, like section by section, to see and basically to try to prove that I was right and he was wrong. And it kind of exposed me to some differences, because they didn't have anything to do with the temple, obviously nothing to do with polygamy. And a lot of the later sort of 1843, 1844 revelations of Joseph Smith didn't make it in, as far as a lot of the mainstream LDS theology. But yeah, so it was kind of exposure to that kind of, I don't know, I was exposed to kids who weren't LDS in high school. And so it kind of gave me a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of kids.
I hear you saying that, and it's always interesting because in some of the last couple episodes, in fact, in all of the episodes, there's definitely a difference between the Mormons that Rick and I were versus Sean. The last guest that we had on, which is my wife, Jen, was thinking along those lines like you and Sean of comparing You have ever compared the Doctrine and Covenants to the reorganized like
No.
we just were not even like paying attention that much.
I was still at the point, like you were saying, growing up, the things you were learning from the Book of Mormon were as much history as anything you were learning about real history.
Yeah.
I was still in that mode. It was just everything to do with the church was just history, and there wasn't really anything else. So I wouldn't have ever even thought about making those comparisons.
So as a teenager, how big of a role did the church play in your life? Like, were you going to church dances? Were you dating Mormon girls? Were you planning for a mission?
So I don't know, right about ninth grade or so, and I think a lot of it had to do with just general teenage angst and how you are when you're 15 and 16 and you just want to rebel and stuff like that. I had this little rebellious period. It's pretty tame as far as those things go. I wasn't really, I don't know, I was just mainly listening to music my mom didn't approve of, hair metal and stuff, right? So, and dating Nancy, and I had this non-member girlfriend that she didn't approve of either. And so I went through this little rebellious phase. And again, it wasn't a huge rebellious phase, but from the standpoint of but I still called it my rebellious phase. And so I had some, interesting teachers in high school that had us read things that were a little more critical. And I kind of explored a little bit outside of the way I can describe it is like Native American sort of philosophy.
Spirituality connected to the earth.
Spirituality connected to the earth. Connected to kind of led me in the direction of Thoreau and existentialism. But then when I actually went and tried to read Thoreau and existentialism, it was pretty too deep for me as a 16-year-old kid. But it was also, yes, exactly. But it was also this but I'm like, this is more, it's more interesting. And the church didn't really, I don't know, it didn't really have much of an appeal to me. And then when I was right around about time of my junior year or sort of senior year, I think my dad, he gave me a journal, or he gave me a journal and said, you need to, he must have had a talk. I don't remember the talk, but he basically said, you need to seriously think about whether or not you want to go on a mission. Now, later on, as I was going through my stuff, and I found a bunch of stuff that I wrote at the time, and actually talked to one of my friends, the friend that wasn't a member of the church, and didn't want to have anything to do with the church. He had asked me right around that time if I planned on going on a mission. And I basically said, yeah, I'll probably go because it's what's expected. But as I looked through my journal, my senior in high school, I got serious about the church to try to prepare to go on a mission. Now, I don't really remember what that means, other than to try to, I had my girlfriend, I stopped going out with the girl who wasn't a member and started dating a younger girl a couple years younger than me who was a member. And I don't know, having this girlfriend was kind of a big deal. And, it's like true love. And, obviously it's in the church context. So the temple and everything, and happily ever after. So mostly preparing for a mission, I think, was, try to get through the year before you're 19 without actually, having to go to the bishop's office, right? That's what preparing to go on a mission, I think, because I don't remember anything else, right? I think I remember reading, I don't know, there could have been classes or something to prepare to go on a mission, as far as our temple preparation class or something, but I don't actually remember what that entailed. So yeah, it wasn't super serious, as far as I wasn't super serious about keeping the commandments. It was just try to keep them as best as possible, without
anything major that would.
Yeah. And to be honest, I didn't really, I didn't get any worse trouble than anybody else.
Right.
You weren't doing anything that anybody else was doing.
I wouldn't have gotten excommunicated from the church. Let's put it that way. Right? There wouldn't have had to been a disciplinary council.
So,
but there was.
right. So you make it through your junior year, your senior year. Now it's time to start thinking seriously about going on a mission.
Yeah.
Was that like, okay, I'm excited to go, or this is kind of an obligation? I'm going to go because I feel obligated. Why did you decide to go on a mission?
I think it all depends on when and how I was feeling at any one period of time. I think there was the expectation that I would go. Absolutely. Like it wasn't an option not to go, really.
Right.
Because culturally, I mean, obviously my friends aren't LDS, so they're not going to go. But there was other kids around that I wasn't necessarily close friends with, that they were LDS. They weren't, they partied, but they're like, all right, time to go, right? Let's get serious. Let's go. Right. And so the LDS kids kind of all fell in line, and you all kind of put, everybody's putting your papers in. So you put your papers in. And so, yeah, I was excited. Plus I had this girlfriend over here, and it's going to be happily ever after. And you got to get married in the temple, and I got to do this mission thing. So I'm going to do this, So, and it was like, yeah, you're gonna do it. Plus my dad had always talked about his mission. He told me that when they didn't have the MTC when he went on his mission. Rather, they went down to Salt Lake City. They put him up in the Hotel Utah, and he said that on the last day in the MTC, they took him up to the Solemn Assembly Room in the Salt Lake Temple, and a general authority was basically like, all right, ask me any question you want. And that's what my dad told me, or at least that's what I remember him telling me. And so that's what I expected the MTC to be like.
Were you in for a surprise?
So I thought I had this kind of understanding of like, oh, it'll all make sense. It'll all make sense, right? So that was kind of this model of how this thing should fit together, how it should all work together. And then I'm given this like expectation of like, all right, get to the MTC, and all the mysteries of the kingdom it's all gonna come together in your mind, and it's all gonna make sense. Plus there's all the stuff about what happens in the temple that nobody ever talks about. And I was under the impression that, you can talk about it once you go on the temple, now you can talk about it.
If you're in the club, you can talk about the
when you're in the temple, you can talk about it. But when you're in the temple, they just kind of usher you through, and you're like, what's happening, and then you're there, and you're like, all right, let's go to dinner. And like,
so the temple tripped you out.
The temple really tripped me out.
But you still went through it and went on your mission.
Yeah.
Went into the MTC, went to the temple in the MTC.
Yeah.
Did you go to the temple in the MTC? Like on your P day?
Yeah, of course.
I just still remember. I just remember going through it and being like, this is still just weird.
Yeah.
I've been through it a few times before. I mean, being here in Utah, where you've got a temple, all over. You got temples all over the place. I've been a few times before I went to MTC, but it's interesting to be that tripped out going to the temple and still go along with it. And I think people need to realize that you're just in this mode of, like we've been talking about, this is history. This is all like is true as anything you would have learned in history in high school and stuff. And so you sort of just go along with it because
it's what's expected.
It's what's expected. It's what you think is completely the truth in terms of history and what's going to happen.
But I think what you just said there is important. You're just going along with it because, and we make this analogy in the episode that we filmed with my wife that's coming up. We're just editing it right now, but we make this analogy of, if you've ever been to a hypnotist show in Las Vegas, and if you've ever been brought on the stage, you don't want to be the asshole that's not going along with the program.
Yeah.
You just be like, oh my God, I feel so great. I feel so special having gone through the temple.
I guess it's what, people refer to as the herd mentality.
Yeah.
You sort of go along with the herd. You don't want to be the cow that is out of place that the cowboy has to go round up. You want to just be part of the group.
I was that cow many times in life.
Well, and I think, I've only been, to be honest, like I have a memory of it. I've been probably maybe 5 times total.
Total.
Wow.
And so a lot of it's kind of it's been over 25 years, right? So, but from what I've seen, from what I remember, right at the beginning they have that, it's kind of a bait and switch where like, all right, you can back out now. You know, you have your chance to back out now, and you're like, well, why am I going to back out now? Like,
But you're in the room.
mission in a week. If I can't go,
Girl, I've been waiting all my life to get here. Why would I back out?
are you sure you want to do this? You're coming in with your own free will.
What is there to back out of? Why?
Yeah, what
What?
the fuck does that mean? Why would I back out?
So yeah, the temple was a pretty weird experience.
Now you've gone through the temple. You've got your mission call.
Too late to back
Yeah.
out now, motherfucker. You already said yes.
Well, and to be honest, when we got the mission call, Australia Melbourne mission,
I mean,
that's
come on.
about the coolest thing ever.
Right? Who doesn't want to go to Melbourne?
I don't think I
Like-
ever heard of Melbourne, but I just saw Australia and I was like,
Well, I think
Melbourne
yeah,
or Melbourne?
everybody said Melbourne. You didn't.
everybody
say
said Melbourne.
No, you didn't.
Oh, the Australian Melbourne mission, right? Of course they said Melbourne.
So yeah, I mean, and so you're talking, it's kind of like a push and pull, like, oh, I'm going to go away for, you know, on this adventure for 2 years, but
It's in
I don't
Australia.
know.
But you're going, I get to go to another country.
Yep.
Don't gotta learn a new language.
It's not in Brazil
it's not a
or
third
somewhere in
world.
South America where I'm going to be living on dirt floors and
Right.
learn another language. I'm going to Australia where I can see kangaroos and koalas.
Yep. Crocodile Dundee.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Yeah.
Right. So
So-
you're excited to go out on the mission.
Yeah.
Then you
When-
get there.
When did you go? You went February of
93.
91? No, February of 90,
93.
93.
93.
Seriously.
Way off.
So, okay, so February 93, you get there. Set up the picture as far as what you pictured it as before you got there to what it is now that you're there.
As far as the mission experience,
Yeah.
Just being
Well-
in Australia, being on a mission in Australia.
okay, so I'm going to back up just slightly and say that one of the things about the MTC,
Okay.
about the mission experience that, okay, the MTC, they didn't explain Mormonism to me.
Explain the MTC.
So the Missionary Training Center in Provo, Utah. And now I guess there's missionary training centers all over the world, but we all went to Provo, Utah. And we spent 3 weeks there. And like I said, my dad's experience was like, oh, they'll tell you, you'll learn all this I thought you would learn all this proof texting stuff. I thought you'd learn all how the whole Mormon theology fits together. And instead they give us that pink notebook and a bunch of tapes that were basically sales tactics to practice, to commit people to do,
Will you be
Basically,
baptized? The
you're,
commitment pattern.
you're
teaching
memorizing-
yourself.
you're like you said, you're memorizing a sales presentation.
a sales pitch.
Yeah.
And stick to the script. And, obviously there was a lot of there was still a kind of an emotional sort of testimony, sort of spiritual aspect to things, but it wasn't near as,
Why? Because you have general authorities that come and speak to you.
yeah.
That's if you make it past the first couple of days. The first couple of days are like, you haven't confessed to anything. You're not going to have the Spirit. Did you falter at all through any of that? Obviously, you made it. Were you
Yeah.
having guilt? Were you going, oh my God, I didn't confess to this. I didn't confess to that.
I did. I didn't. There was some stuff I didn't confess to until July with Stolten, but not, low grade sexual sort of stuff. And by low grade, I mean necking and petting in the parlance of our, that's what immorality was. I kind of, you never want to admit admitting to sexual stuff with priesthood leaders was not something that anybody ever.
I was just gonna say that probably felt like you had actual intercourse.
Yeah. Well, or to be honest, at that point, I mean, kind of the story picks up a little bit later. I actually confessed with the thought that maybe I'd get sent home because I wasn't actually having the experience I thought.
No way. So you were like, I'm going to go confess and Stolten will send me home.
exactly, because I hated my companion at the time.
And it was the weight of the world, right? That was resting on your shoulders at the time.
Yeah.
It didn't allow you to really really get into it because all you were thinking about was, I think I'm getting sent home.
Like, no, I want to get sent home, so I'm going to go confess to this shit.
Yeah.
So they get me off this fucking island. I'm done.
That's kind of how I felt. And again, it was kind of, but that was kind of a little bit later on. So the MTC was fine. I mean, I didn't really feel like the MTC was really, I mean, I had a cool group of people I was with. If you guys remember, Wilden, Hurst, we made it to us. Yeah. So MTC was fine. Like, other than the fact that it was salesman's tactics, and I felt kind of disconnected from the whole thing. I got to Australia, and at first I had again, it's like, it depended on who you were with. My trainer was, he was a cool guy from a, really, his name was Bingham, and he was from a small town in Oregon, and I was from a small town in Idaho, and he was pretty Zam, but it was kind of like you said, like, it wasn't like, he wasn't an a-hole at all. And it was kind of that the first 2 months of my mission was like, it felt like we were doing what we were supposed to be doing and doing missionary stuff. We were in Caulfield, and it was, 2 country kids in a big city, and we were going to convert the place, and so many different types of people, all different types of people, middle of, real. It felt like there was a lot going on.
Well,
and we worked pretty hard. I'd get pretty homesick.
I was just gonna say,
still-
I served in Caulfield later on.
Yeah.
And just to talk a little bit about what you're referring to, I was told that there was a bigger concentration of Jewish people there than anywhere else outside of Israel.
Yeah.
And so that you had a lot of Jewish people. It was just a congregation of a lot of different.
The melting pot, it was very diverse. I mean, you had-
Melbourne is known as a melting pot, but
Yeah.
even that area specifically.
And so it was just eye-opening, and just meeting people, just meeting all different types of people. And so, I mean, I'd go through these bouts of homesickness where I'd miss my girlfriend, but then you'd have these experiences, and we were working pretty hard, so there was kind of a lot going on as far as like people to see. There was some long-term investigators, and it felt like a missionary experience. So after a couple months, my trainer gets transferred, and an Australian missionary comes, and he's senior companion, and I don't know, he's a nice guy, but he didn't want to really work that hard. I say this, it was like, it all really depended on who I was with.
Yeah. Bro, right. When you golf, you play at the level of the people you're golfing with. When you're serving your mission, you kind of match the same level of eagerness and intensity that they have.
So we weren't working as hard, and I kind of felt, I don't know, I started feeling a little bit guilty about that. And then one P-Day, he always wanted to go into the city, and I went into the city a few times with him, but I kind of wanted to go to the Stake Center and play basketball with the other missionaries. So it was always this kind of, should we go here or should we go here? He wants to go in the city. And finally one day he's like, I'm senior companion, we're going to the city. I'm like, I don't want to go to the city. And so he's like, all right, I'm going to the city without you. If you don't want to come, you can come. If you don't, you don't. So he left, and I stayed in the flat. And I stayed in the flat all day, just like terrified.
Yeah, because how do you show up? You can't show up to the church to
Wait,
play basketball
let me set the stage
by
here.
yourself.
Let me set the stage here. You are commanded in the missionary guide, the little white handbook. We'll put a picture of it up here. That you are to be with your companion at all times, except when you are
In the shower, in the bathroom.
taking a dump or
Jerking off.
rubbing one up. Sean likes to talk about all the time. So, like, for this, like that,
It's
you're out
it's
for
like
how
the-
many months? And this
It's
is
like the
happening.
cardinal
3
sin.
months.
I can't even
To
imagine.
leave
3
your
months.
Like I had that fear when I got put with Brody Smith that he was going to leave me. So and like how do I tell the president that he left?
Yeah.
I didn't go with him or whatever. So your companion leaves. You can't show up to the
I can't go to the stakes there and play basketball with other missionaries by myself.
What the hell were they thinking in the city when your companion showed up by himself without you?
I don't know. But I don't even know. He showed, well, you know, and I'm thinking something terrible is going to happen to one or both of us. You know, there's somebody right around the corner that's going to murder me. And like, so I'm just sitting in the flat, terrified all afternoon. And finally around like 5 o'clock, he shows up and we go make our tea date or whatever. And that was.
Wait, before you finish. So I know whenever we went to the city, it was to meet up with other missionaries. I'm guessing it was the same for him.
I don't know. Well, it was, but I don't know if he just wanted, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't remember.
You don't know where he went. You don't know if he went to the city. You don't know if he went and hooked up with some chick. Like,
He never told you?
No, I think it was just like this, like, all right, you're good. We're back. We're good. Nothing bad happened. Okay.
You're back with your companion and nothing's happened.
that would have messed me up. That would have messed me up at that early age. That would have really been hard as a young missionary.
I told President in the letter, we had to write President a letter every week, right, and tell him how we're doing. And I said, we're not working as hard as I want. I'm not happy. And so at transfers after 3 months, I get a transfer, and I'm transferred from Caulfield, where we, you know, things had started to slow down because we weren't working as hard, but there was still stuff to do. There were still people to see. There was still tea dates to have. There were still, you know, people to see. I get sent to Doncaster, and I'm in a flat with 2 Australian guys who are older, the zone leader and his companion, King and Pope, that was their names. And then my companion, who I'm not going to name, I ended up hating this guy. He was, have you heard the term scrupulosity? It's a mental illness around trying to be so hyper spiritual and keep the rules to such a level, because he had mental illness. Like, he once a week, the zone leader would take him to go see a therapist, and I go with the zone leader's companion. We'd go on splits. We'd go play arcade games, but they would go to see the therapist. This guy he had to keep the rules, and we had to, and this was June in Melbourne, in Doncaster, and it's a rich area, and the zone leader and his companion get all the tea dates, because my companion and I don't know anybody, and he doesn't know how to make friends with the members, and we were basically tracting from morning until 9 o'clock at night.
And it was this, because I was in Doncaster in March of '94.
Yeah, so this is June of '93.
Oh, wow.
So you've gone from feeling like I'm not working enough to being with this guy who is just like way too much.
Ask
Way too much.
never see, David.
Exactly. Yeah, so it was
I got just the guy.
I know who you need to go with. You need to go with Elder Dickhead, who doesn't doesn't break any rules.
exactly. And so it was like going and yeah, and so I had it was like a night and day experience to be like, all right, so yeah, it wasn't, you know, I kind of started feeling guilty because we weren't tracting 20 hours a week. We were still tracting before, but you know, now we're tracking 30, 35, 40 hours
That's
a week.
nuts. That's knocking on doors for 30, 40 hours a week.
And it's raining, and it's
June is winter time.
cold.
Which,
and it's
that's
winter.
kind of the vision that most people outside of the church have of missionaries is door knocking, but it's one of the least effective things you can do. And Australia is just a hard mission in terms of conversions.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time doing it, and it is not fun. You don't want to be doing it. It's ineffective, and here you're doing it.
It's taking rejection to a whole new level and going, hey, this is okay. We're trying to find that golden family or the golden person.
Yeah.
But every door you knock at, and you get a no, you're one step closer to that next door that they say yes.
So you said that while you were, that I'm pulling from the bio that you kind of sent to us, You said that you started seeing leadership a little bit differently when you were out on your mission.
Okay, this is going to come a little bit, okay, so we're almost to that point.
Okay, all right.
So at this point, I'm like, all right, I am unhappy. I don't like this guy. So when I'd go on splits with the other missionary, King, he's cool. He was Australian. He's like, we talk about stuff. And he's like, I think, do you have anything you need? You're not happy. Do you have anything you need to tell, president about? I'm like, well, I probably got to tell him about these, the necking and petting with my girlfriend, So they arrange it, and I'm like, and so in my brain, it's like, all right, I've done this. It wasn't full on, I was still a virgin. So I get it in my head, like, all right, this is maybe going to get me sent home, or at least it's going to be, I can go talk to president. So it was right around the 4th of July, and I went and talked to, it was a P-Day, and went and talked to president. It was weird because it showed up, and he didn't have his tie on. I remember that. I didn't have a tie on either because it was P-Day. And I told him about it, and which is kind of weird. Like, it was the only time I've ever confessed stuff to a priesthood holder, really.
So you didn't confess either?
No, I confessed it to president, but
I didn't confess anything.
I didn't confess it to my bishop or stake president. No, nothing.
None of your business. Get on here.
Well, yeah, because no, it's the.
You had an ulterior motive, though.
So was
you were
it-
going, if I confess this, they're going to shit me out of here.
Right.
Yeah, kind of, or they might anyway.
So prior to the mission, we talked about how you go through a set of interviews with your bishop and stake president, and you're like, that's what I was going to ask. It's coming from a point where if I tell them this stuff, they're going to keep me from going on my mission, and if I don't go on my mission, I'm going to kind of be the
bastard of the ward.
Yeah.
If you don't go on your mission,
Yeah.
people talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Anyway,
Like most people hold on to that stuff, and then you get out there, you go through the MTC, which was what you were referring to.
the first couple days in the missionary training center, it is all repentance. If you haven't repented,
It's the guilting and shame.
you will. And guys were dropping like flies, getting sent home.
So you make it through that, and now you're to a point where you're not happy. This zone leader that you're going on splits with is saying you're not happy. Are there things you need to confess? And you're at the point where you're like, yeah, I kind of do, but also now I'm ready to spill the beans and use it as an excuse for them to send me home.
yeah.
$100 ticket home.
So I had this interview with the president, this special emergency interview with president, and I told him everything, and he calls up my stake president in Idaho, and they chatted about BYU football for a few minutes, and he's like, well, I got a young man here that has something to tell
While you were there,
you.
sitting in the office with him?
What's that?
You were sitting in the office with him?
Yeah.
when you called him?
Oh yeah. He calls him up, and he's like, puts me on the phone, and I got to tell my stake president that I, heavy petted with the girl, and he knows the girl because he's her stake president too. So when side story, when we left and went back, I got on the phone and told her, I'm like, stake president knows that we,
Heavy petted.
just so she would know that, you can't really lie now.
Right.
If you have whatever, I don't know. But he's like, all right, you're all good. Go back to your area. And I'm like, it kind of felt like the weight was off, right? The weight was off, but it's like, all right, I guess it's gonna, maybe God will bless me now. So
Maybe that'll be the thing that turns things around for me.
yeah, couple days later, still raining, and I won't say his name. I don't want to out him because maybe I don't know how this guy is. So he pissed me off, and I basically had it, and I, at some point it got physical, and I body slammed him, and I went, and I'm like, I'm buying a phone card, and I'm calling my mom, and I'm begging to come home, and so I got a phone card, called my parents. They called the flat, and I talked to my mom. In my memory, we talked for like 3 or 4 hours, but in my journal, we only talked for about an hour.
Family very often, so when you could talk to them, those were long. I remember having long conversations with my family.
Yeah, we weren't supposed to talk to him except for Christmas and Mother's Day, but I called her and she called me back and she begged and begged and begged for me to stay. Begged and begged and begged for me to stay. And so finally at the end of that conversation,
I'm sorry.
I'm stay. And so because I think things got, I don't know exactly what happened, but I think the zone leader that was living in the same flat as us told president, basically said, you need to split these two up because otherwise somebody's going to get hurt. And
Yeah.
so about the end of that week, so in the middle of July, they put me with this guy. His name is O'Farrell. He's from Perth. And he is the spinningest motherfucker I've ever met in my life.
So real quick, explain spinning.
Spinning is just like you're not keeping the rules and you're not doing missionary work and you're not. I mean, I kind of get the feeling from this guy was like, he kind of said as much that his kind of family gave him an ultimatum was like, you go on a mission and we'll support you or we're not helping you with your legal troubles.
Wow.
He was a surfer. He was huge into reggae. He loved the Polynesians and Polynesian culture. And we hung out. We didn't do much at all. We were in the flat with two other guys that were also a guy named Papa and Elwood.
Papa.
They were good guys.
Papa was a good guy.
And they both were good guys. But we were, O'Farrell was a little bit too much for them. And so so it was kind of like, suddenly I'm with like, so it's kind of like he's like the dark side of the mission, right? The absolute dark side of the mission. And after, so at some point, Papa and Aylworth, I think Papa was district leader. At some point, they realized that we weren't really doing much. And O'Farrell was senior companion, so I was just following. And at that point, I was kind of done. Because I'd kind of gone through, like, I've done everything I'm supposed to, and, like, put me to this guy, and he doesn't want to I don't want to door knock. It's winter time. I'm not going to door knock if he's not going to door knock, and I'm not going to push the envelope. I'm just going to.
Like, what would you do during the day?
We'd take the bus or take the train down a couple stops and hang out at the shops and hope we didn't run into any members.
Sounds like this.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I hope you didn't run into any members. Oh, that's so funny.
I was just going to say,
that's so true.
That sounds like Wilden and I in Sunbury.
yeah.
We'd either stay in the flat, listen to music and talking to this asshole, or we'd be walking down to the shops and getting run into members.
So that kind of continued until, I don't know, I think we had that flat had a rat infest problem.
Ugh.
Like, there were rats.
What area was this?
Lilydale.
Lilydale. Oh yeah.
So we split up the 4-man flat into 2 2-man flats, and we found another flat. And so I was there with O'Farrell for about 3 weeks, and right around, we got into our new flat, and about 2 or 3 days later, I don't know, we were just in the flat for like a day or so, I remember, and we come home, and in the closet, there's a stack of like a stack this high of gay porn.
What?
Yes.
You
in the
served
flat.
You were there right before.
I served in Lilydale.
You were
but
right there
Nothing wrong-
before
listen,
Johnson.
I'm
Right?
pretty sure that material
There's
was
nothing
gone.
wrong with gay porn. There's nothing wrong
No,
with
this is a brand new flat. So
somebody broke in and left gay porn in your flat.
somebody broke in and left gay porn in the flat.
Wow.
Well,
Who could it be?
it's-
Was it Satan?
or assistants to the president.
You think the
That's who-
APs did something like that?
We think the APs did something like that.
Listen, I'm all about thinking the APs were assholes, so don't worry. There's no reason for me not to think something like that.
So, because it wasn't mine, and it wasn't O'Farrell's. I mean, it could have been left there from before. And just to get this out there, I'm at the point in my life where I really could care less.
Well, now, yeah, but back
Anything.
then, that was huge.
That was huge. That was huge, right? That was huge for, yes. So I don't know, a day or so goes by. Another thing, just to get the full confession out. So O'Farrell, he had somehow, I don't know how he got hold of some marijuana. So I told this in my story and told you guys this. Rick's read my story, right? So he's like, I think this is marijuana. We should try to smoke it. And at this point in time, I have this kind of weird experience. Like, I think I started to go on inactive on my mission. Like I think that's kind of how it happened.
Yes.
We
So,
weren't inactive. We wanted to go to church, and they wouldn't let us go to church.
so
That's inactive.
anyway, so this is my very first experience with marijuana in my entire life, is with O'Farrell on my mission in Lilydale. And so we made out of Pepsi can, we made it like a cheap bong or just a,
Who knew how to do that?
he knew how to do
Girl did.
that. He knew how to do
That
that.
was totally O'Farrell's weed.
I don't, and I have life experience since then. I don't remember I know what it's like to get high. I don't remember that. I don't remember the psychological experience then. All I knew is this was something. So I don't remember either was cheap weed or I didn't inhale enough. I probably just kind of like inhaled a little bit and felt.
Is that your first time
Energy.
smoking weed?
Yeah, absolutely.
You never
You
get
said
high
that
your
was
first time.
You did.
Not now. That was the second time.
So in any event, so like that's a day or so. That's like a day, and then that's like a day or two later. The APs and the zone leader show up. Or actually, if I get the story right, it was because I read in my journal. It was the zone leaders and our Papa and the district leader came to do splits with us and confronted O'Farrell about the porn. And then the next thing I know, I'm in an interview with President.
Yeah, real quick.
How did the APs know about the porn? If it was in your flat, how would they have known about it?
That's the thing. That's why I'm like, I don't know how it got in there.
Oh, dude, listen. All I know is APs.
Who were the
setting
APs
up-
then?
APs were setting people up.
I don't remember. I remember one of them's name was Anderson, but I don't remember the other one's name.
That's crazy, man.
It might have been, okay, so I think it might have been, so there was, the AP when I first got there was like Bruce R. McConkey's grandkid. But I don't know if it was the same AP.
A general authority in the church. He wrote a fucked up book called Mormon Doctrine.
He wasn't just a general authority; he was an apostle.
Well, that's what I meant.
Yeah,
Sorry. He was an apostle. Wrote a book called Mormon Doctrine, which is off the shelves now in most Mormon libraries, but I know my parents have a copy of it. It's all fucked up.
Anyway, I don't know. They confronted O'Farrell about the porn. They confronted me about the porn. A president says, and this is president, right?
President Bolton.
President Stolten. And he said, all right, I want you're not in trouble, but you're going to get transferred. So they shipped me to the country.
So this was your first emergency transfer?
It was my second because I just got emergency transferred because I was going to kill my other companion.
Yeah. Okay.
So I go from so this is I'm 6 months in. I'm in my fourth area.
Wow, you're only 6 months in right now.
Fourth area. I'm in
Jeez.
Traralgon. With another Australian guy. He's checked out. And I'm basically.
Hey, if there's
I'm in
any
country.
missionaries or any guys that are thinking about going on a mission right now that might be watching this is what it's like. This is the fucked uppery that is serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's not the primary song. It's not what your dad has told you it is. It is crazy. If you've watched our episode, you know how fucked up our story was. This is just another testament of how crazy fucking missions are. It's not what you think it is. It's absolute fucking shenanigans, right?
Well, I remember right before I left, I heard the coined phrase of missions being the greatest secret of the church.
I have that written in my journal. Missions are the best kept secret of the
Yes.
church.
So I get shipped to Traralgon out in the country,
All right.
and I was with the Australian companion. I had 2 different companions when I was there. Both of them were checked out. We didn't really do much. I don't remember. I guess we might have knocked on a door or 2, but didn't really do much out there. Had friends with a few members that we did stuff with.
How long are you out at this point?
Well, when I got out there, I was out 6 months. And then I was 4 months in Traralgon. I mean, I don't need to think we need to blow by blow through time. I mean,
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to get a baseline of like, where are you at in the mission so far? So about 6 months.
6 months out, and then I'm out in, Traralgon. I mean, and it was kind of like what you guys have said in your other episodes. Like, there's not a lot happening in the country. And if they send you to the country, I didn't really realize this at the time because I'm a country kid anyway, right? So living in the country is fine. It's slower. I'm used to that. And I was okay with like not getting up to much because I'd kind of already tried. I kind of gave up at that point, to be honest.
We're talking milk bars, hanging out at the newsstand, going
Yeah.
out, That's Pokies.
Or there was that member guy we were just talking about, who Steve, who I was always trying to get him to take us places. He'd come over on P days, we'd hang out. And
There always seemed to be, in every area, there seemed to be at least one person that you would hook up with that would take you places
Yeah.
on P days.
Yeah, we had Atwell in the
Well,
city.
while we weren't supposed to be out doing sightseeing and stuff like that, that's really what we use.
You're
I
out
mean,
there
you're
for
not-
2 fucking
And you're in
years.
Australia, of course you're going to be going out and doing that. But there always seemed to be that one person that would take you out.
Yeah.
It was Steve.
And there was Steve, and there was a couple other. There was another member woman. She's a less active woman that we'd always like go over to her house and watch a lot of television at her house. But
There was always that chick, that single lady in the ward that would have come over, didn't care if you watched TV, didn't care what you were doing, just was happy to have
She
you there.
just thought you was cute Americans.
Oh, use
and
it.
so I found this like in my journal. I found this. This was move forward a few months when I'm at about 8 months, and it's right around. It must have been right before you got to Maui, because we had it was right around Halloween time, right around the end of October. We had the Maui elders over for the whole weekend. So we had the Maui elders at our flat. We borrowed a television and a VCR and went and got like 8 movies, 8 video cassettes.
Do you remember,
R-rated
do
movies,
you remember any of those movies?
No, I don't remember any of them.
Did you go to movies in the theater?
Yeah, I did a little bit later on. But I remember we had this like marathon, and I think we even skipped church too.
Attaboy.
Like and I remember waking up, and I found this page in my journal, and I pasted over it with and I tried peeling as much off, but it was basically like a screed of like, this is the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever experienced in my life. I can't believe this is what it's all about. I can't believe it. And later on, I'd pasted stuff over that. And I remember waking up early when a day I wrote that. It was early, or kind of like early in the morning and everybody's asleep, and it's like a Saturday or maybe it's the Sunday morning, and we're going to end up missing church or whatever. And I remember going into and like taking a shower and just like crying in the shower, thinking this is just like not what it's supposed to be.
Not what you expected.
Having a breakdown of like, this is not what it's supposed to be. And these guys are not what it's supposed to be. And I am not what I'm supposed to be. And it's like, I don't like missionary work. I don't want to be here, but yet I can't go home because I can't disappoint my family. I
Yeah.
can't talk to anybody about any of this stuff. I'm on the kind of like I'm kind of like in the rebellious side of the missionaries. I you know, gravitate to them more so than the ones who are I can't stand the ones that are keeping all the rules. And so it was just this like inner kind of turmoil thing that kind of came out. And I kind of pasted over that, and another month go by and I get transferred back to the city to Croydon for a couple months. And then me and this other elder we went to New South Wales, opened up that area, just me and this elder and a box of Book of Mormons. And we went up there, and he was Australian too. But he was pretty well checked out. We tracked it a little bit, I remember, up there, but we didn't really do much other than, and that's when I went to the movies. There was only one member. The rest, you know, we used to have sacrament meeting like in her house a couple times. And then in her house. Like
She was the only member in the city.
Yeah.
What was the city?
It's Deniliquin, New South Wales.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
A little tiny town. And she had been begging for missionaries to help convert her husband. And so he agreed to the first discussion, and then like, nope, not interested. And there we are, like for another couple months.
Wow.
And so I remember we had a pet cat. We hung out with our neighbor who always tried to get us to drink alcohol, and we never did.
We don't drink.
Yeah,
Smoke the reefer.
exactly. No, that was just the one time with O'Farrell on my mission anyway. And then I got sent to Wagga, and Wagga Wagga had a reputation as being the place where the bad missionaries were sent. And the couple missionaries before us, before I got there, had been sent home for going to clubs, including one of my former companions from previous that I was in Troutman with.
You can imagine what it would have been like if I'd have gone out to Wagga.
I remember having that. I remember having that thought. It was like it was so far away. Like Wagga Wagga was
It was the farthest
away
north.
from
Yes.
our mission home.
You're like a 5-hour train ride.
All the bad missionaries were shipped out to Wagga.
What did you
It
say?
felt like you were out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Did you say it was 14? It was 13, 14 hours away from Melbourne, right? Like
Well, I don't know exactly how far. I remember just thinking it's halfway between Melbourne and Canberra.
you were closer to Sydney than you were to Melbourne.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so you were out there.
Were you living in that lady's house?
Well, that was in a little town called Deniliquin, and then I went to Wagga. No, we went to the lady's house. We were there for like a day or two until we could find a flat. Then we
Okay.
found our own flat.
Okay. All right.
But she picked us up, and we stayed at her place for a day or so.
So, go back to this. You started saying about how you started distrusting the leadership.
Yeah.
Where did that stem from?
Well, it stemmed from the AP. So when I was with O'Farrell in Lilydale, and the AP sort of set us up, and he was talking all the time, and he was always talking about, you know, leadership, this, and I think he'd had a lot of emergency transfers in his day too. But it kind of was set up into this place where like you didn't really we had this whole stats thing, right? You guys have talked a little bit about where you had to report the stats, and it got to the point like, was anybody ever reporting true stats?
No, we called it statting, and it was basically just telling them whatever the fuck they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
We call it lying. We said we were statting.
So it kind of became that. And so I kind of got this opinion of people that there were people who, we were all kind of more or less the same, except there were people who pretended to leadership that they weren't.
You're
to
right.
get promoted into
Because they wanted the calling. They wanted to be able to write home and say, "Dear Mom, today they made me a zone leader."
Not only that, but we've talked about how it looked to other people in your ward and neighborhood and stuff to get sent home.
Did you hear
But
about
imagine
Elder Howard? He was
Even
a
going home and you were
leader.
a zone leader, you were an AP, you had these high callings within the mission that just put you up on this pedestal.
So here's the question. If we were statting and bullshitting and whatnot, how many general authorities are just statting so they can be given that same fucking recognition? Oh, did you hear about your brother? He's been called.
Well,
as form of the
you know,
seven.
Here's what I think is in it. This speaks to human psychology, because at what point do you believe your own bullshit?
Well, that's a good
I
question.
think if there's anything that the mission taught me, was that I had a choice. I kind of said this in my story to you guys, that the Mormon Church sets it up, that they set up these sets of rules, not just the Mormon Church, but a lot of different churches, a lot of different religions. I don't want to just bag on the church. But anytime you have a set of rules with a set of standards, that really, if you really want to get serious about whether or not you're worthy for, and can say absolutely yes to that temple recommend, that you know, whatever that is, you're going to tell yourself a story why you're worthy, right? At some level.
You'll
And
justify.
you know, and it depends on how far you draw down that rule. And you could be crazy like my one companion who, you know, if we weren't following every single letter of the rule, right, he had his knickers in a twist, right? Or you could fib, and then you could tell yourself it's okay because everybody else does it, or stat because everybody else does it. And then you realize, are those people really having all those stats? Were you tracking that many hours? And there were times when we did track that many hours.
Well, you were there when they started talking about 40 discussions a week.
Yeah, right towards the end. And I
Okay.
didn't really pay too much
Talked
attention because I was out by then. I was checked out by then.
We've talked about how they started like going out, and kind of like Captain America did. He was out there selling war bonds. They would bring people into Zone Conference going, I taught 40 discussions a week and so can you. And like, how did you take those assholes standing up going 40, like you'd been out there, you knew what the work was like. Was 40 discussions a week possible?
I kind of, by that time, to be honest, by that time, I mean, that was right towards the end.
That was
So
in October of 1994.
yeah, that was right towards the end. And that might have been one of the, yeah, that was right towards the end. And by then I was just like, I was counting my days down, and I wasn't taking it too seriously anymore, because I wasn't taking these people as seriously anymore, to be honest. Like I was, you know,
You were checked out.
I was checked out by then. I had a little period in Waga where I had a good companion for a few months, and we, you know, it was like, if his attitude, he was young, he'd just been out a few months. He's like, all right, if we work for, you know, we're going to set a goal of tracking 20 hours a week, and we're going to do that. And after that, we're not going to worry. Of course, we didn't like break the rules, but we didn't worry about like being crazy about it.
I hear you saying this, and I go, that makes so much sense. I'm going to work a certain number of hours a week, and then the rest of the time I'm not going to feel guilty about. I felt guilty every time I wasn't out doing what I was supposed to do. I felt guilty about it.
And then we would do fun stuff. Like we would drive, like, I don't know, drive around and, I don't know, hike on a hill, or, you know, go hang out at the shops a little bit. But we actually were doing some of the work too. It wasn't as though we were.
I remember justifying it going, I'm out. I got my name tag on. I got my shirt on. I got my tie on. If the Lord wants to put somebody in our path, we're out, so we can talk to them. You know, that was kind of my justification for,
Maybe we did that a little bit, but that
With this on, I'm out marketing. So,
Yeah.
So
And
I'm
then-
talking to somebody, I'm marketing.
the other thing that happened in Waga is actually I was a district leader in Waga for like, that was the only time I ever was with any sort of leadership. I was a district leader for 3 months. And it was kind of fun. It was the sisters were there, and we'd hang out with them a little bit, but we'd work, and it was enjoyable. And it was right at the end of Stolten's time. Like, yeah. And then Hearst came. And so towards the end of my mission, one of my last interviews with President Hearst,
the Earl Hearst.
I'm in there. Maybe not the last one, but right towards the end. He said, so he corners me, and he said, "You are a passive missionary. You're a passive missionary." to my best accent.
No,
He
no.
says, you're going to go back to the mines in Soda Springs if you don't have a baptism. So, and I think at the time, it's really interesting because I'm like, he knew enough about my hometown to realize it's a mining community, but we don't really have mines. I mean, it's a phosphate mining community in Idaho, but we don't have the mines. I worked in the plant, right? I
He's
can go to
basically
mines.
saying to you, you're gonna amount to nothing.
Yep.
If you go home without a fucking baptism.
You're going to be a blue collar failure if you don't get a baptism.
What a piece of shit.
And I said, and the thing about it is that at that point in time, he didn't really even show me any love. He didn't show me anything beyond
Love, dude.
anything beyond
About anybody, he was there to do a fucking job, and that was all he was concentrated on.
anything beyond a scowl. And we had just had that sort of reaming from Elder Merrill. And I basically told Hurst, I said, he's like, what? He kind of like, well, he's like, you're not going to amount to anything. And if I get this right, you got to make sure you get this right. And he kind of sets back and waits for me to respond, like, thinking maybe I'd just like, all right, I'm going to, double down and try to.
God, Gabriel Hurst.
But here's what I did. I said, I don't think these people, these Australians' lives would be better if they joined the Mormon Church than they are now. I don't see what the church has to offer them. I don't see how their lives would be better. I don't see how their lives would be materially better. I don't necessarily see how their lives would be better and he's like, he didn't really, I think he misunderstood me because he started to go off. He's like, how do you think you know better than the Savior? And I said, I don't really, and I said, I don't really care if they join the church or not. And he didn't have anything to say to that. And he's like,
Expecting you to come back.
Yeah, he wasn't expecting any type of pushback. He was
No.
expecting just obedience.
so he's like, we're done. And you know how you usually ended with a prayer and everything and those things? Nothing. Like, I'm done. We're done.
You didn't take a knee with President Hurst that
No,
interview.
not in that one. I don't.
You said we're done.
We're done. And I left. I left.
Hurst, if you're still alive and watching this,
Not.
shame on yous.
Shame, shame. Know your name.
I looked it up, and he's actually not with us anymore.
Oh, let's.
So you've now gone through this experience. You're home. How does your transition from
That bullshit.
to now you're back home, and what does life look like?
So, all right. So, I kind of came home a little bit disillusioned with
Wow.
with the church, and like I said, I kind of went with I don't know. My life going up to the mission experience was very much. I mean, I was from a small town in Idaho. I don't know. I'm athletic. I was athletic. I played football. I wrestled. Pretty intelligent. I basically kind of had everything kind of work out really well. I was successful. I was very, I was successful at, successful at everything. And suddenly I wasn't really the mission. I really kind of came home feeling like a failure. And maybe
Minds.
I did. Well, that's the thing. That weren't actual mines. That's why it didn't make any sense. It was like Hearst read enough into my history, history to be able to threaten me, but not really to care.
What a shitty way to control somebody,
So
to threaten them.
So anyway, I came home with this kind of like feeling of a little bit of feeling like a failure, like my mission wasn't what it was supposed to be. And I came home with a few sort of statements. I came home with a statement of like, the younger kids, if they happen to ask me, I'm not going to tell them that they have to go on a mission. I'm not going to say you need to go on a mission. I'm going to say something like, you should go if you want to go.
You know, it's interesting you say that. So I've got a younger brother who's 2 years younger than me. So he would have been preparing just before I went home. So I remember, I don't know if it was on Christmas or Mother's Day or just one of the many times I just called home, but I remember either talking to him or writing him a letter. I can't remember which, but I told him, look, if you go, it needs to be because you want to go. You feel like it's the right thing for you. Don't go because mom and dad think you should go, or that anyone else. Don't go because you feel obligated to go. Go because you want to go. Otherwise, don't do it. So my older brother, we call him the perfect child.
Johnny.
Because
Hey, Johnny. Thanks for watching.
He, to us, was perfect. You know, he went on his mission. He was AP, came home, went to BYU, got married in the Tipple. Like, he's the perfect child. But I remember being in North Carolina before I went on my mission and asking, you know, we sat and talked for a few minutes. And I remember asking him about his mission and would he do it again? And he told me what I say today, actually. He told me I wouldn't go on another mission, but if I had to go back and do it over again, I would. And I feel the same way. And it's largely because of what we were talking about before, because of the friendships, the relationships that I created, and the good experiences I had in Australia, that going through everything we went through, getting sent home and all that fiasco, I would still go back and do it over again.
Oh, I would
never
go back on another mission.
Would you go back? Would you do it again?
I'd do it again. Absolutely. I mean,
Would you, if we asked you that question 6 months ago?
yeah, I probably would have said that.
All right.
Yeah. I think I would have I value the opportunity. I value the experience in Australia. And for a long, actually, let me put it this way. I would have said that 6 months ago, because I've always said I'm really grateful that I was able to leave the country, because I was able to meet all these different people, and it was just a life experience. I had met so many different people that were so much not like me that it kind of really set me up to be like, all right, I can be around other people that aren't like me.
And it's like we were just talking about. It got you out of that whole American prism of America is the greatest country in the world, the only totally free country in the world. It helped us see a completely different perspective on the world.
Yeah, I value that experience. Now, would I have gone? I don't know. It's like hindsight 2020. I wouldn't be where I'm at without that mission, like that, going through it. Like I've often had the saying, I'm like, all right, mom, and tell to my hypothetical conversations with my family about why I'm not in the church anymore. If you wanted me to stay in the church, you should have let me come home, because of that would have guilt tripped me for life.
So
wow, that's a very profound statement right there. If I had to come home, I would have been guilt tripped for life, and I'd have been in it. But you made me stay. I saw the truth, and I came home. So now you're home. What happens?
For more information or questions regarding the Underground or any of the topics we discuss, email us at wearetheunderground3@gmail.com, or you can message us on Facebook or YouTube by searching We Are the Underground 3.